The evening sun cast streaks of orange across the ocean as waves lapped against the pillars of the pier. The scent of saltwater mixed with caramel corn drifted through the air, and music from a street violinist wove through the crowd. To most, it was just another lively Friday night at Huntington Beach Pier. For 12-year-old Morgan Hayes, it was supposed to be the best part of her week. Morgan loved the pier, its lights, its sounds, the way the world seemed open and endless when she looked out at the water. Sitting in her wheelchair, she adjusted her denim jacket and tucked the ends of her blanket neatly over her legs. She had been born with muscular dystrophy, and though her body often betrayed her, her spirit never stopped dreaming. Tonight, she was determined to enjoy the Ferris wheel with her cousin Ryan, who had promised to push her along the boardwalk. "Ferris wheel first?" Ryan asked, his curly hair blowing in the ocean breeze. He was 15, a little goofy, always cracking jokes to make her laugh. Morgan's smile was small but bright. "Yes, before the line gets too long." Ryan began steering her through the crowd, dodging people carrying sodas and cotton candy. For a while, everything was perfect. Then, 3 boys about Ryan's age spotted them near the arcade entrance. They leaned against a railing, sipping from tall cans of soda, their eyes darting like wolves seeking prey. Their names were Travis, Colton, and Bryce. They weren't from the nicest families in town, and trouble seemed to follow them wherever they went. The pier was their stage, and they liked having an audience. Travis noticed Morgan first. His grin spread cruelly. "Well, look at this. Out for a joyride, Wheels?" Ryan stiffened, gripping the handles of the chair tighter. "Keep walking," he muttered under his breath, trying to push Morgan past. But Colton blocked their path, stepping forward with mock concern. "Careful, Ryan. Don't let her run anyone over." He tapped the footrest of the chair with his shoe. Oops. Morgan's heart hammered. She wanted to shrink into her blanket, vanish into the sea. She'd been teased before, but something about the sneer in Travis's eyes made her stomach twist. "Move, cripple." Bryce spat the words like poison, kicking the wheel hard enough to jolt the chair sideways. Morgan gasped, grabbing the armrests as the chair rattled. "Stop!" Ryan shouted, shoving Bryce's shoulder. His voice cracked with anger. "Don't touch her." The boys laughed. Travis leaned down so close Morgan could smell the soda on his breath. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Can't get up and do something about it?" Her eyes blurred with tears. She hated crying in front of strangers. She hated feeling helpless. Her body wouldn't let her escape or fight back, and the crowd around them, though some people slowed to watch, didn't move to intervene. That silence cut the deepest of all. Then it happened. The ground began to tremble, not from the ocean, not from footsteps, but from engines. Deep, roaring engines rolling closer, blending into a single thunderous sound. Heads turned down the street feeding into the pier. A line of motorcycles appeared, headlights glowing against the dusk. One after another, they poured onto the pier, chrome gleaming, exhausts growling like an oncoming storm. The laughter of the boys faltered, replaced by unease. At least 30 bikers rode in, men and women clad in leather vests patched with the insignia, Steel Serpents MC. Their boots struck the boards in rhythm as they slowed to a stop, parking in formation like soldiers closing ranks. The leader, a man in his early 50s with weathered skin and a scar tracing his jawline, pulled off his helmet. His salt and pepper hair caught the pier lights, and his gaze swept across the scene with sharp, unblinking focus. His name was Dean Mercer, president of the Steel Serpents. To strangers, he looked like someone to fear. To those who knew him, he was a protector. "What's going on here?" Dean's voice carried over the crowd, calm but heavy with authority. The bullies froze, their confidence draining. Travis tried to laugh. And nothing. Just hanging out. Dean's eyes moved to Morgan. She sat trembling, her cheeks streaked with tears, her knuckles white as she clutched the arms of her chair. He crouched beside her, his tone softening in an instant. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Morgan's lips quivered. "They kicked my chair." Dean stood slowly, turning back toward the boys. His voice deepened. "Which one of you thought it was funny to pick on her?" No one answered. The circle of bikers dismounted, folding their tattooed arms, forming a wall of steel and leather around the bullies. The crowd that had once been silent now began murmuring in support. Some held up phones, recording. Parents pulled their kids closer, whispering, "Serves them right." Ryan stepped up, his voice trembling but brave. They called her names. And he kicked it hard. She almost fell. Dean nodded. "That's what I thought." He looked back at Travis, Colton, and Bryce. "You've got two choices right now. Own up, or we'll make sure the whole pier knows exactly who you are and what you did." The boys exchanged panicked glances. Bryce stammered, "It was just a joke." Dean's jaw tightened. "Jokes don't make little girls cry." The bikers stepped closer, their boots heavy against the wood. The boys tried to back away, but there was no space left. For the first time that evening, Morgan's tears slowed. She looked up at the circle of bikers and felt something she hadn't expected: safety. She was still small, still fragile in her chair, but for once she wasn't invisible. Strangers were standing for her. Dean glanced down at her again. "Don't worry. Nobody's going to hurt you while we're here." Morgan's throat tightened. She had no words, but the look in her eyes said everything. The boys, meanwhile, looked trapped. The crowd pressed in, whispering, muttering, glaring. Their cruelty was no longer hidden, no longer ignored. For the first time, they were the ones who wanted to disappear. But what Dean and the Steel Serpents planned to do next would leave a mark on everyone watching, and change the way Morgan saw herself forever. The pier had fallen into a hushed silence, broken only by the sound of the ocean below and the low idle of the motorcycles. All eyes were on Dean Mercer and the three bullies boxed in by the circle of bikers. Dean folded his arms, his stance commanding without a word. Finally, he spoke, each syllable measured. "You boys think you're tough because you kicked a chair. Because you went after someone who can't stand and swing back. That doesn't make you men. That makes you cowards." Travis's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The courage he had when mocking Morgan had vanished. One of the bikers, a tall woman with red hair tucked into her helmet under her arm, stepped forward. Her name was Valerie Cruz, and she was the club's road captain. Her voice cut through the air like steel. "If I ever catch any of you laying hands, or feet, on someone like her again, you'll answer to all of us." Colton swallowed hard. "We didn't mean." "Enough." Dean's hand went up, silencing him. He turned toward Morgan, his voice softening again. "Sweetheart, do you want us to make them leave, or do you want them to listen?" Morgan blinked, surprised that he asked her at all. Her whole life, decisions had been made for her, doctors, teachers, even well-meaning family. For once, someone gave her the choice. Her voice trembled, but she managed, "They should listen." Dean nodded once. He turned back to the boys. "You heard her. You're going to listen." The crowd leaned closer, eager to see what would happen. Ryan placed a hand on Morgan's shoulder, pride and relief flickering in his eyes. Dean motioned to the bullies. "Down on the boards. Sit." The boys hesitated. A biker cracked his knuckles, and they scrambled down onto the pier, sitting cross-legged like scolded schoolchildren. The crowd erupted into scattered applause and laughter, phones flashing as they recorded the sight of three teenage tormentors brought low by their own cruelty. Dean crouched so he was eye level with them. "Now, I want each of you to look at her. Really look at her. Do you see weakness? Because I don't. I see strength you don't understand." Morgan's cheeks burned as the boys lifted their eyes toward her. For once, their gazes weren't mocking, they were uneasy, exposed. Valerie stepped forward. She lives every day fighting battles you can't even imagine. Getting up, moving through a world that isn't built for her, that takes more guts than any of you have ever shown. Bryce's head dropped. We're sorry. The word sounded small, almost pathetic, but Morgan's chest tightened. For years she had dreamed of the day bullies might apologize. Yet hearing it now, she realized the apology wasn't the point. What mattered was that the world had stopped looking away. Dean stood and gestured to the crowd. Everyone watching, remember this moment. Because real strength doesn't come from tearing people down. It comes from lifting them up. His eyes swept back to the boys. Now get out of here before I decide to call your parents myself. The three scrambled to their feet, tripping over one another as they bolted down the pier, disappearing into the crowd. Phones captured their retreat, the jeers from bystanders chasing them out. The bikers slowly relaxed, but the circle remained around Morgan like a shield. Dean crouched again beside her chair, his weathered face softening. You did good, sweetheart. You stood tall, even sitting down. Morgan's lips trembled. Thank you, for helping me. Dean smiled faintly. You helped yourself. You told us what you wanted, and we listened. That takes courage. Ryan finally let out the breath he'd been holding. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared for her. Valerie placed a hand on his shoulder. You did right by standing up. But now you know, you don't have to stand alone. The bikers began talking with Morgan and Ryan, introducing themselves, making jokes to lighten the heavy moment. One rider pulled a stuffed bear from the claw machine in the arcade and handed it to Morgan with a grin. Another adjusted the blanket on her legs like she was family. For the first time that night, Morgan laughed, a small, unguarded sound that drew smiles from everyone nearby. Dean's voice rose once more, addressing the crowd. Every one of us here tonight had someone try to break us once. That's why we ride together. And that's why we'll never let cowards win. If you see someone being hurt, don't just stand there. Step in. Be the shield. The crowd erupted in applause, not just for the bikers but for Morgan, who sat straighter in her chair than she had all night. The pier lights shimmered above, the Ferris wheel spinning in the background like a halo of colors. As the noise settled, Valerie crouched by Morgan. You still want that Ferris wheel ride? Morgan's eyes widened. Really? Really, Dean said with a grin. And you're not waiting in line. Two bikers rolled her chair carefully through the crowd, clearing the way as though escorting royalty. The people parted, clapping, cheering, some calling out, "You're amazing, girl," and "We're with you." At the Ferris wheel, the operator, moved by what he had seen, stopped the ride and opened the gate. With Ryan's help and careful hands from two bikers, Morgan was lifted safely into a carriage. Ryan sat beside her, and Dean gave a reassuring nod before the wheel began to turn. As the ride lifted higher, Morgan looked out over the ocean, the pier, the glowing lights below. The bikers were still there, their motorcycles gleaming like guardians at the edge of the crowd. She wiped the last of her tears, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time, pride. Ryan nudged her gently. You okay? Morgan nodded, her eyes shining. I'm more than okay. I feel strong. When the Ferris wheel reached the top, she looked out across the horizon, the sky painted in deep purples and golds. For once, she didn't feel small. She felt limitless. Down below, Dean watched the ride turn, his arms folded, a rare softness in his weathered features. He knew the bullies would remember tonight for the rest of their lives, but more importantly, so would the girl they tried to break. And as the Ferris wheel turned, carrying Morgan higher, she realized something she would carry with her forever: she was never truly alone. There would always be people willing to stand, roar, and shield her light when the darkness tried to smother it. That night, a crippled girl on the pier became something else entirely in the eyes of everyone watching, an emblem of courage, of resilience, and of the truth that kindness is stronger than cruelty when people choose to rise together. And when Morgan's laughter rang out over the pier, it was clear, the bullies hadn't just lost. Hope had won.